She's bound to the enemy alpha, the one man she was born to destroy. 2 wolf packs, decades of bloodshed. And now, their war will end with the cruelest twist of all. A forced mating between sworn enemies. She's the fierce heir who watched her brothers die at enemy claws. He's the ruthless alpha prince who tasted vengeance before he could walk. They've trained their whole lives to kill each other. But the ancient ritual doesn't just join them, it chains their souls together. If one dies, they both die. If one bleeds, they both bleed. Now they can feel each other's every emotion, including the forbidden desire neither can control. But when assassins attack on their wedding night, a terrifying truth emerges. Someone wants them both dead. As hunters close in and their own packs turn against them, one question burns. Will their forced bond save them, or destroy everything they've ever known? The harsh moonlight cast long shadows across the ceremonial grounds, creating a landscape of sharp contrasts that mirrored Lyra's internal turmoil. Her muscles coiled tight beneath her traditional mating ceremony attire, a deep silver-gray tunic embroidered with the Silver Moon Pack's intricate wolf crest patterns. Every fiber of her being vibrated with a primal rage that threatened to consume her. Around her, the pack elders stood in a rigid circle, their weathered faces impassive. Her own packmates gripped her arms, their strong hands restraining her as she struggled against their hold. The scent of pine and distant wood smoke mixed with the metallic undertone of suppressed aggression. Memories flickered like broken glass in her mind. Her 3 brothers, strong, fierce warriors who had defined her childhood, their bloodied bodies spread across rocky ground. The Bloodfang pack had attacked without warning, leaving nothing but destruction and grief. She remembered her father's raw-throated howl of mourning, the way her mother had collapsed, and how she, then just a teenager, had been transformed from a wild, laughing girl into a weapon of pure vengeance. "Hold her steady," an elder commanded, his voice rough as gravel. Lyra's wolf surged beneath her skin, a wild thing barely contained. Her eyes, normally a steely gray, flickered with an amber wolf light that betrayed her inner struggle. Every instinct screamed to fight, to reject, to destroy. And then he appeared. Kale of the Bloodfang pack stepped forward, his movements deliberate and controlled. Unlike Lyra's wild energy, he radiated a cold, calculated fury. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore traditional dark leather that seemed to absorb the moonlight. His face was a mask of rigid control, but something dangerous churned just beneath the surface. Their history was written in blood. Her brother's blood. "You will not touch me," Lyra snarled, her words a promise and a threat. Her muscles tensed, ready to fight despite being restrained. The elder who would conduct the forced mating ceremony watched them with eyes that had seen generations of pack conflicts. This ritual, a desperate attempt to stop generations of bloodshed between 2 powerful wolf packs, balanced on a knife's edge. Kale's gaze locked with hers. No warmth, no mercy. Just a cold calculation that made her wolf bristle with anticipation of conflict. "Silence," the elder commanded, raising a ceremonial bone dagger that gleamed under the moonlight. "The packs have spoken. This union will happen." Lyra's breath came in ragged bursts. Her entire life of training, of hatred, of revenge, all of it had led to this moment. And yet, something unexpected flickered at the edges of her consciousness. A sense that nothing was quite as simple as she had been taught. The ceremonial ground felt charged, like moments before a lightning strike. Wolves from both packs watched in tense silence, generations of conflict condensed into this single, explosive moment. Would she submit? Would she fight? The answer trembled in the air, waiting to be revealed. The elder's chant rose, ancient and rhythmic, weaving between the pack members like a living thread. Lyra's muscles locked rigid, her wolf fighting every instinct that demanded she resist. Kale moved closer, each step deliberate and controlled. The ceremonial ground fell silent except for the elders' monotone recitation of mating bond incantations. Wolves from both packs formed a tight circle, their collective energy pressing against Lyra and Kale like an invisible weight. When Kale's hand gripped her shoulder, Lyra's body seized. His touch was not gentle. It was a predator's grip, firm and unyielding. She could feel the tension in his fingers, the barely restrained violence humming just beneath his skin. The elder's bone dagger glinted, catching moonlight. A droplet of ceremonial blood marked the ground between them. A symbolic connection, a promise of union that neither wanted. Kale's breath was hot against her neck. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. Then his teeth, sharp, unforgiving, pressed against her skin. The moment of contact exploded. Magic surged like liquid lightning, burning through their veins. Lyra's consciousness fragmented, spinning wildly between her own perception and something else entirely. Suddenly she was seeing through Kale's eyes. A memory not her own. A woman's face. His mother. Pale, beautiful, with eyes that held infinite sadness. Blood pooling around her fallen body. The raw, primal grief of a young boy watching his mother die, murdered in some violent conflict she hadn't deserved. Simultaneously, Kale was experiencing her memories, the horror of discovering her brother's mutilated bodies, broken limbs, torn flesh, the metallic smell of blood mixing with forest soil, her own scream of anguish echoing through the trees. Their individual pain merged, creating a tsunami of shared emotions so intense it transcended human understanding. They weren't just sharing memories, they were experiencing each other's deepest, most visceral traumas. Lyra's body convulsed, bones shifting, skin rippling. Her wolf erupted from within, silver-gray fur bristling as transformation consumed her. Beside her, Kale was changing too, dark fur emerging, muscles expanding, the human form dissolving into something wild and powerful. Their wolves recognized what their human halves had violently rejected. They were mates. Two massive wolf forms collapsed onto the ceremonial ground, trembling from the sensory overload of their unexpected connection. The Alpha's dwelling loomed before them, a neutral ground structure built of massive timber logs and stone, designed to contain and control the volatile energy of newly mated werewolf pairs. Two pack guards flanked Lyra and Kyle, their movements stiff and ceremonial as they escorted the pair inside. The interior was Spartan but meticulously arranged. A single large bed dominated the central space, covered in thick wolf pelts and traditional woven blankets. Carved wooden walls bore ancient pack symbols, intricate markings that seemed to watch with silent judgment. As the guards departed, the heavy wooden door closed with a resonant thud that felt like a final, irrevocable sentence. For several heartbeats, Lyra and Kale stood frozen, sizing each other up. Her muscles coiled tight, hands clenching and unclenching. Kale's jaw set in a hard line, eyes dark with barely contained fury. "I won't share space with a blood fang," Lyra snarled, her voice a low, dangerous growl. Kale's response was equally venomous. "Believe me, Silvermoon, the feeling is mutual." In an instant, they moved. Lyra lunged first, her body a blur of motion, aiming to strike with supernatural speed. But something strange happened. Before her hand could connect, Kale was already shifting, anticipating her attack with impossible precision. He blocked her strike effortlessly, their bodies moving in a strange, synchronized dance of aggression. Each time one attempted to attack, the other was already prepared, as if reading the future. "What is happening?" Kyle growled, frustration evident in his voice. Lyra felt it too, a deep, intrusive connection that transcended physical space. She could feel the echo of his intentions before he even moved. Every muscle twitch, every potential strike reverberated through their newly formed bond. When she tried to punch, he knew. When he attempted to grab her, she was already moving. Their supernatural abilities, typically an advantage in combat, had become a bizarre form of mutual neutralization. After several minutes of failed attempts, they separated, breathing heavily. Rage and confusion mingled in equal measure. "The bond," Lyra muttered, understanding dawning. "It's preventing us from harming each other." Kale's laugh was bitter. Forced not just to mate, but to be connected. The dwelling's interior seemed to close in around them. One large bed, two sworn enemies. A bond neither wanted, but could not escape. Lyra moved to one corner, Kyle to the opposite side. The tension crackled between them like electricity, sharp and dangerous. Neither would concede the bed, yet both felt the unnatural pull of the mating bond, a constant, uncomfortable reminder of their new reality. Their wolves churned beneath their skin, restless and confused. Centuries of hatred battled against a primal connection neither could fully comprehend. The first night of their forced union had begun, and peace seemed impossibly distant. The ceremonial wounds on Lyra's arms burned with a dull, persistent ache. Moonlight filtered through the dwelling's narrow windows, casting long shadows across her skin as she examined the ritual cuts. Each mark was a precise line, deliberately inflicted during the mating ceremony. Symbols of pack loyalty and submission that now felt like brands of her own forced surrender. Her fingers traced the edges of the deepest wound, just below her right elbow. The skin was raised and angry, still fresh from the ceremonial blade. Blood had dried in a thin, dark crust, making the wound stiff and uncomfortable. Across the room, Kale watched her, his body tense. Every movement she made sent phantom pain rippling through his own muscles. The mating bond was a cruel thing, connecting them in ways neither could comprehend or control. When she winced, he felt a sharp echo of her discomfort. Lyra tried to reach the wound on her back, twisting awkwardly. Her fingers stretched, barely grazing the edge of the cut. Each movement pulled at the raw skin, sending sharp pangs of pain that made her muscles clench. Kale's jaw tightened. The bond forced him to feel every sharp stab of her pain. He could sense her frustration, her attempt to maintain pride while struggling with a simple task of healing. "Let me," he finally growled, the words torn from him more by the bond than by any genuine desire to help. Lyra froze, her body going rigid. "I don't need your help. Bloodfang." But the pain was real, and the bond was insistent. Kale moved closer, his movements deliberately slow, giving her time to object. When she didn't immediately attack, he produced a small healing salve from a nearby shelf, a standard item in any werewolf dwelling. His touch was rough but purposeful, fingers pressed against her skin, applying the salve with a practiced efficiency that surprised her. Lyra remained perfectly still, caught between defiance and necessity. "The incense they use for these ceremonies," Kale muttered suddenly. "I can't stand it." Lyra's eyebrow raised slightly. "You mean the sage and mountain ash mixture?" "Gives me a headache every time," he responded, continuing to tend to her wound. A moment of unexpected understanding passed between them. Such a small thing, a shared hatred of ceremonial traditions, but it was something. A tiny crack in the wall of mutual animosity. "Night hunting," Lyra said softly, almost as if testing the waters. "I prefer it to daytime tracking." Kale's hands paused for a moment. "So do I. The forest is clearer, quieter." Their conversation was stilted, each word carefully measured. Yet it was the first genuine exchange they'd had that wasn't laden with pure hatred. The bond hummed between them, a strange conduit of unexpected connection. The first hints of dawn were just beginning to paint the sky when everything erupted into violence. Glass shattered in a thunderous cascade. Wooden doorframes splintered. The dwelling's peaceful silence exploded into a cacophony of snarls, breaking wood, and the thundering of multiple wolf paws against the floor. Lyra's wolf instincts flared to life before her conscious mind could process the attack. She was already shifting, muscles rippling and bones reshaping as dozens of rogue wolves poured through every possible entrance. The attackers moved with military precision, a coordinated assault that suggested months of planning. Her first glimpse through the chaos revealed a face she thought she'd never see again. Marcus, her childhood friend. The wolf she had mourned as dead for 3 years now stood among the attackers, his silver-gray fur bristling with rage. "Traitor!" Marcus's voice cut through the mayhem, a human scream that made her freeze momentarily. "You dare mate with the enemy? After everything we lost?" Across the room, Kale was also transforming, his massive black wolf form creating a defensive stance between Lyra and the incoming attackers. But something else caught his attention. His own beta advisor, standing among the rogues, not defending but actively directing their assault. The beta's betrayal was written clearly in his calculated movements, signaling attack patterns and coordinating the wolves' brutal entry. "They want us dead," Kale growled, the bond allowing Lyra to hear his thought as clearly as if he'd spoken aloud. Rogues crashed through remaining windows, their coordinated assault filling the dwelling with fur, teeth, and murderous intent. The ceremonial space designed for a peaceful mating ritual was now a war zone. Lyra's tactical training kicked in. Even shocked by Marcus's presence, she maintained her combat focus. Her smaller gray wolf form moved with lightning speed, ducking and weaving between attacking wolves, her movements precise and calculated. Marcus continued shouting, his rage consuming him. "You abandoned our dead! Our brothers! For what? A political mating?" The rogues pressed their attack, clearly intending to overwhelm the newly mated pair through sheer numbers and surprise. Kyle's massive form fought defensively, using his size to block multiple attackers while keeping Lyra protected. The bond between them amplified their fighting awareness. Each could sense the other's movements, creating a synchronized defensive strategy neither had practiced, but now executed with shocking efficiency. Blood began to splatter across the dwelling's pristine floors. Rogue wolves fell, but more continued streaming in. This was no random attack. This was a meticulously planned assassination attempt against both pack heirs. Marcus remained at the forefront, his eyes locked on Lyra with a mixture of betrayal and calculated rage. The childhood friend she thought she knew had transformed into something unrecognizable, a weapon fueled by misdirected grief and manipulation. As wolves clashed and the dwelling transformed into a battleground, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Someone had engineered this moment. This was more than an attack. This was a carefully constructed plan to eliminate 2 potential pack leaders in a single, brutal strike. The chaos of the attack dissolved into a blur of motion and survival instinct. Lyra's wolf caught a glimpse of a hidden panel, a secret escape tunnel her tactical training had instantly recognized, even as Kale seemed to sense the same escape route simultaneously. Their movements were synchronized in a way that defied logic. Where one wolf zigged, the other zagged, creating an impossible-to-predict defensive dance. Rogue wolves lunged and were deflected by their perfectly coordinated counter-movements, the mate bond transforming them from 2 individual fighters into a single, lethal unit. Kale's massive black wolf form took the brunt of direct attacks, his muscular frame absorbing blows that would have crippled a lesser fighter. Lyra darted between larger attackers, her smaller gray wolf using speed and precision to inflict critical strikes. Blood matted their fur, some their own, some from fallen rogues. The hidden tunnel's entrance was barely shoulder width, requiring split-second timing. Without a word, without even a conscious thought, they moved. Kale crashed through a wooden cabinet, creating momentary cover. Lyra slipped behind him, her body moving in perfect sync with his movements. A massive rogue wolf, almost the size of a small bear, lunged at them. Kyle twisted, exposing his flank in a way that seemed suicidal, but which perfectly positioned the attacker directly into Lyra's waiting teeth. Her precise strike severed the attacker's primary muscle group, sending him tumbling. They reached the tunnel entrance. Kale's powerful shoulder muscles pushed aside the hidden panel while Lyra provided covering fire, her wolf form spinning to snap at any approaching rogues. The bond between them hummed with an electric awareness. Each knew the other's intention before it happened, creating a fighting style more seamless than any trained military unit. As they plunged into the darkness of the underground passage, fragments of shouted conversations echoed behind them. Can't let the bloodlines mix. Pure lineage must be maintained. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them to move in single file. Kyle took the lead, his larger form clearing potential obstacles, while Lyra followed, her heightened senses alert for any pursuit. Their breathing synchronized, their wounds throbbed in shared rhythm. When they finally emerged into the wild borderlands, a stretch of dense forest marking the neutral ground between pack territories, both collapsed momentarily. Lyra's tactical training warred with her exhaustion. Her wolf form panted, wounds seeping blood onto the forest floor. Kale's wolf nudged her, checking her injuries. The mate bond allowed them to feel each other's pain, each other's fatigue. A wound on her rear leg made her limp slightly, a wound Kale could feel as acutely as if it were his own. They were miles from safety, wounded and hunted. But for the first time since the mating ceremony, they were united by something stronger than their ancestral hatred. Survival. The forest around them whispered with potential danger. Distant wolf howls suggested their attackers were still searching. But in that moment, Lyra and Kale were no longer Silvermoon or Bloodfang. They were simply survivors. Lyra's leg throbbed with an angry, pulsing heat that spoke of more than simple injury. The wound, initially a minor tear from their escape, had become a festering warning of potential infection. Her wolf's natural healing abilities were fighting a losing battle against whatever bacteria had entered the wound. When she tried to shift, the pain became unbearable. Her body trembled, muscles contracting and relaxing in uncontrolled spasms. Kale watched her, his own wolf sensing her weakness. "You need protein," he said quietly. It wasn't a suggestion, but a statement of survival. The mate bond amplified their mutual desperation. Hunger gnawed at them both, not just physical hunger, but a primal need to heal, to survive. Kale's muscles coiled with predatory intention. His wolf recognized their critical situation. One injured mate could mean death for both. His transformation was smooth, powerful. A massive black wolf materialized where a man had stood moments before, muscles rippling with controlled strength. His injured mate would need him to be perfect. Lyra remained in her smaller gray wolf form, her leg dragging slightly. Her role was protection and lookout. Her tactical training meant she could scan their surroundings while Kyle hunted. Her ears swiveled constantly, catching every forest sound. Wind through pine needles, distant bird calls, the soft padding of small creatures. The deer materialized like a ghost between pine trees, a young buck, perhaps 2 years old. Kale's hunting style was methodical. No wasted movement, no unnecessary chase. He calculated distance, wind direction, the buck's potential escape routes with mathematical precision. One explosive leap, powerful jaws, A clean kill. When he returned, dragging the deer, Lyra had maintained her vigilant watch. Her wolf gave a slight nod of approval, a gesture that felt more like mutual respect than affection. They fed together with a strange synchronicity. The mate bond meant they could feel each other's hunger, each other's physical sensations. As Kale tore strips of raw meat, Lyra's body responded, her own hunger rising in tandem with his. Survival trumped centuries of inherited hatred. As night fell, they found a small cave tucked into a rocky outcropping. The bond wouldn't allow them distance now, not with her injury, not with potential threats surrounding them. They would need to rest together, share warmth. When they settled, something unexpected happened. The mate bond, previously a source of frustration, became a conduit of something deeper. Their dreams began to merge. Lyra saw Kale's childhood through his eyes, rigorous training, his mother's stern teachings about pack survival, emotional distance as a survival strategy, the weight of leadership expectations crushing down on young shoulders. Simultaneously, Kale experienced her memories, the day her brothers died, her transformation from a grieving sister to a weapon of vengeance, endless combat training, the systematic destruction of her emotional vulnerability. Their shared dreamscape revealed painful similarities. Two heirs, two survivors, two weapons crafted by generational trauma. The river's rushing sound masked their approach until the last moment. 5 rogues burst from the thick riverbank foliage, their wild eyes filled with murderous intent. Lyra and Kale had mere seconds to react. Water sprayed around them as the first rogue lunged. Kale intercepted, his massive form blocking the attack with brutal efficiency. But these weren't random attackers. They moved with practiced coordination, each targeting a specific vulnerability. Lyra's tactical brain processed their formation instantly. 2 attacking from the front, 1 circling wide to their left, another preparing to strike from an elevated rock formation. The 5th hung back, clearly the strategist. "Left side," she growled through their mental bond. Kale understood immediately. As the first 2 rogues charged, Kale's muscles coiled. He didn't just defend, he became a weapon. His massive, wolf form intercepted the attackers, teeth and claws finding precise points of vulnerability. A crushing bite to one wolf's shoulder, a sweep of his powerful hind legs sending another tumbling. Lyra moved like liquid shadow. Where Kale was raw power, she was calculated precision. She anticipated the flanking attack, spinning just as the left side rogue leaped. Her smaller form used the attacker's momentum, throwing him into the rocky riverbank with a sickening crack. The mate bond transformed their fighting. They weren't just 2 wolves. They were a single, devastating unit. Lyra could see through Kale's eyes, predicting movements milliseconds before they happened. Kale felt Lyra's tactical calculations flooding his instincts, turning brutal strength into surgical strikes. The rogue attempting to attack from the elevated rock never saw her coming. Lyra's leap was perfectly timed, catching him mid-jump and sending them both tumbling into the rushing river. 3 down, 2 remaining. The final 2 rogues seemed to realize they were outmatched, but desperation made them dangerous. The strategist, a scarred gray wolf with a distinctive notch in his right ear, pulled something from a waterproof pack strapped to his side. Documents, sealed in a protective sleeve. Kale's attention flickered for a split second. The remaining rogue seized the opportunity, lunging for Lyra's injured leg. But the bond warned her microseconds before the attack. She twisted, her own wounded leg becoming a weapon. A brutal kick sent the attacker sprawling. Silence descended. River water continued its endless journey. Steam rose from bloodied wolf bodies. Kale transformed first, his human form breathing heavily. blood streaked his muscular frame, some his, some from their attackers. He retrieved the waterproof documents the gray wolf had been carrying. "These weren't random attacks," he said, voice low and dangerous. Lyra shifted beside him, wincing as her injured leg protested. Her tactical mind was already analyzing. Someone wants us dead, and they're coordinating across pack lines. The documents were a mix of coded messages and location maps, fragments of conversations, names partially obscured. But one thing became crystal clear. This was no simple vendetta. Someone was systematically working to ensure their mating and survival never succeeded. Kale's fingers traced a partially burned message edge. These communications, they're from both Silvermoon and Bloodfang leadership. Lyra leaned closer, her body instinctively seeking the heat and protection of her mate. A reaction that would have horrified her just weeks earlier. The mate bond had fundamentally altered something between them. Trust wasn't a choice anymore. It was survival. The abandoned den was little more than a hollowed-out space beneath an ancient oak's massive root system. Damp earth and decaying leaves filled the air, but it offered sanctuary from their pursuers. Kale dropped their recovered documents near the entrance, his movements careful despite the exhaustion etched into every muscle. Lyra collapsed first, her injured leg finally giving way. Blood matted her wolf fur, now returned to human skin, creating a stark contrast against the dark earth. Her breath came in ragged gasps, the pain of their recent battle radiating through their mate bond. "Let me see," Kyle muttered, his voice rougher than usual. The bond wouldn't let him ignore her wounds. Every throb of pain she felt echoed through his own body. She tensed as he approached, old instincts of mistrust rising. But the mate bond hummed between them, a force more powerful than years of learned hatred. Kale's hands were surprisingly gentle when they first touched her leg, probing the wound with a softness that contradicted his earlier brutal fighting. "It's deep," he said, not looking at her face. "The river water will have contaminated it." Lyra gritted her teeth. Werewolf healing was powerful, but not instantaneous. Infected wounds could mean days of vulnerability, a death sentence when rogues were hunting them. Kyle found a small stream of water trickling near the den's edge. He tore a piece of his already ragged shirt, using it to clean her wound with a tenderness that seemed to surprise them both. Each careful touch sent strange electricity through their connection. Not just physical pain, but something deeper. "Why are you being nice to me?" Lyra's question came out more vulnerable than she intended. Kyle's hands paused. "The bond. It doesn't let us harm each other, even if we wanted to." But it was more than that, and they both knew it. Something had shifted during their desperate fight by the river. They'd moved as one unit, their bodies and minds perfectly synchronized. Years of training to hate each other had dissolved in moments of pure survival. Lyra's wound needed cleaning. An infection risked slowing them down. She saw Kale's internal struggle, the way his muscles tensed, the way his eyes darted between her leg and her face. "Just do it," she finally said. The cleaning was brutal but necessary. Kyle used river water and some dried herbs from his survival pack, his touch clinical but not cruel. Each touch sent waves of sensation through their bond. Pain, yes, but something else. A connection neither had expected. When he finished bandaging her leg, something changed. The space between them felt charged, electric. Weeks of forced proximity, shared danger, and the mate bond had been wearing down their defenses. Lyra moved first. Or maybe Kale did. The bond made such distinctions blur. Their first kiss was nothing like the romantic stories. It was angry, desperate, full of years of pent-up emotion, hatred, fear, confusion, and something deeper they couldn't yet name. Teeth clashed, hands gripped. The kiss was a battle, just like everything else between them had been. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Something had irrevocably changed. They stared at each other, shocked. The mate bond pulsed between them, a living thing more powerful than their individual wills. Years of training to hate each other seemed suddenly fragile, ready to crumble. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The bond spoke volumes, a connection deeper than words, than history, than the bloody feud between their packs. The cave system wound through ancient rock like veins of forgotten memory. Lyra's fingers traced the weathered stone walls, her wolf senses tingling with an awareness beyond human comprehension. Kale moved behind her, their bond humming with an almost electric tension that had grown more intense over the past 2 weeks of constant flight. "Look," she whispered, brushing dust from a series of intricate carvings. The symbols were unlike anything they'd seen in modern pack records. Predating the brutal war between Silvermoon and Bloodfang, these markings told a different story, one of unity, not division. Kale's breath caught as he examined the images. Primitive paintings showed wolves with distinctive markings, some with the silver-touched fur of Silvermoon, others with the deep crimson undertones of Bloodfang, fighting side by side. They were battling creatures that looked almost prehistoric, massive shadowy forms that seemed to consume light itself. "This can't be," Kale muttered, his fingers touching a painting where a Silvermoon wolf and a Bloodfang wolf stood shoulder to shoulder, their pack symbols intertwined rather than separated. Lyra's hand brushed against his, the mate bond flaring between them. Months ago, such contact would have triggered an immediate fight. Now it sent a wave of understanding, of shared vulnerability. The cave was deep, carved into the heart of a mountain neither of their packs had claimed. Layers of dust suggested it hadn't been disturbed in centuries. Moonlight filtered through a small opening high above, casting strange shadows that made the ancient paintings seem to move. They had been running for weeks, rogues hunting them, their own pack leaders wanting them dead. The constant danger had stripped away their defenses, leaving something raw and vulnerable between them. Kale's hand found Lyra's, their fingers intertwining almost unconsciously. The paintings told a story their packs had worked hard to erase, a time when Silvermoon and Bloodfang were not enemies, but allies. Why would they hide this? Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. The cave seemed to pulse with ancient energy. Generations of secrets pressed against them, the weight of hidden history making the air feel thick and charged. Their bodies were tired. Weeks of running, fighting, surviving had left them physically and emotionally exhausted. The mate bond that had once felt like a curse now felt like their only protection against a world that wanted them destroyed. Kale's hand moved to Lyra's face, tracing the line of her jaw. No words were necessary. The bond between them had become something more than just a magical connection. It was survival. It was understanding. It was the only truth they had left. Their kiss was different from before. Not angry, not desperate, but complete. The ancient cave seemed to hold its breath as two wolves, raised to hate each other, finally surrendered to the bond that had been pulling them together since the moment of their forced mating. Clothing fell away. Hands explored. The mate bond amplified every touch, every sensation, until they could no longer tell where one body ended and the other began. Their lovemaking was intense, passionate, as if trying to crawl inside each other's skin and hide from the world that wanted them dead. The first rays of dawn crept into the cave, casting soft light across Lyra and Kale's intertwined bodies. Their skin bore the marks of their passionate night, bruises from their previous fights, bite marks from their mating. a testament to their journey from enemies to something more complex. Lyra stirred first, her wolf senses prickling. Something was different. The air felt charged, heavy with anticipation. Beside her, Kyle's muscles tensed, his breathing changing from deep sleep to alert awareness. A low rumble echoed outside, not the sound of a single wolf, but hundreds. Synchronized, deliberate. Kale's hand instinctively reached for Lyra, pulling her closer. Their mate bond thrummed with a mixture of defensive energy and something else, a strange calm that felt incongruous with imminent danger. "Do you hear that?" Lyra whispered, her tactical mind already assessing potential escape routes. Before Kale could respond, voices filtered through the cave's rocky entrance. Voices that should have been fighting each other were instead speaking in coordinated, measured tones. Lyra's mother's distinctive voice cut through the ambient noise. "Secure the perimeter. No one enters or leaves without authorization." Kale recognized his father's deeper tone, responding, "Agreed. Full containment." They exchanged a look that suggested years of planning, of careful orchestration. Slowly, they dressed, their movements synchronized by the mate bond. Lyra's hand unconsciously found Kale's, their fingers intertwining as they prepared to face whatever waited outside. The cave's entrance suddenly filled with silhouettes, not attacking, not charging, but standing in precise formation. Silver Moon warriors stood shoulder to shoulder with Bloodfang wolves. Their traditional colors, silver and deep crimson, blended together as if they had never been separate. No aggression, no tension, just a unified presence. Lyra's mother, Elena, stepped forward. Her silver-streaked hair caught the morning light, her eyes sharp and calculating. Beside her stood Kale's father, Marcus, his build massive and imposing. "We need to talk," Elena said, her voice leaving no room for argument. The hundreds of wolves surrounding the cave remained perfectly still, a living wall of fur and muscle that suggested this moment had been meticulously planned. Kale's hand tightened on Lyra's, their bond allowing them to communicate wordlessly. Something monumental was about to be revealed. The cave fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the controlled breathing of hundreds of wolves. Elena's gaze locked onto Lyra, her expression a chilling blend of calculation and something that might have been maternal, if maternal could ever describe cold-blooded manipulation. "The war was never real," Elena began, her voice clinical and detached. "Every raid, every death, every drop of blood spilled between Silver Moon and Bloodfang was carefully choreographed." Lyra felt Kale's hand tighten around hers. The mate bond vibrated with a mix of shock and rising fury. Elena continued, each word like a surgical knife cutting into Lyra's understanding of her world. "Your brother's deaths? Orchestrated, not by Bloodfang wolves, but by my own carefully selected assassins. We needed martyrs. We needed to forge your hatred so completely that you would become the perfect weapon." The words hung in the air, heavy and devastating. "Each body was positioned precisely," Elena explained, her tone almost academic. "Mutilation designed to trigger maximum emotional response. We knew exactly how to break you, how to shape your grief into a weapon of pure, focused rage." Lyra's world tilted. The memories of finding her brother's bodies, memories that had defined her entire existence, were suddenly revealed as a manufactured nightmare, manufactured by her own mother. Across from Elena, Marcus, Kale's father, stepped forward. His confession was equally brutal. Kale's mother was eliminated because she began asking dangerous questions, he said. She saw through the manufactured conflict, so she had to be removed. Her death was staged to look like a Silver Moon attack, precisely calculated to ignite Bloodfang's rage and ensure continued conflict. Kale's breath caught. The bedtime stories, the memories of his mother's supposed heroic death at enemy hands. All of it a lie. Why? Lyra demanded, her voice a razor's edge of controlled fury. Why go to such lengths? Elena's smile was cold. Power. Pure and simple. A divided population is easy to control. By maintaining constant external threat, we ensured internal compliance. Each pack remained insular, suspicious, focused on an enemy that never truly existed. The wolves surrounding them remained motionless. Not soldiers, not defenders, but witnesses to a decades-long lie being systematically dismantled. Lyra's mind raced. Every lesson, every training session, every moment of her life had been carefully constructed to produce exactly the soldier she became. A weapon forged in manufactured grief. Kyle's rage radiated through their bond. Not just at the revelation, but at the cold, clinical way their parents described generations of manipulation. How many died? He asked, his voice a low growl. How many families were destroyed to maintain this fiction? Marcus's response was chillingly matter-of-fact. Hundreds. Possibly thousands. Each death carefully selected. Each conflict meticulously planned to maintain tension without total destruction. The cave seemed to grow colder with each revelation. The truth was not just a wound. It was a systematic demolition of everything Lyra and Kyle had ever believed. As the shock of their parents' revelations settled like bitter ash, Elena's voice cut through the stunned silence. You both were never just a random mating, she explained, her tone clinical and cold. You are the culmination of generations of strategic breeding. Kale's muscles tensed, his body vibrating with barely contained rage. The mate bond between him and Lyra crackled with electric tension, their shared disbelief amplifying each other's emotions. Every generation, Marcus added, stepping forward with the same detached precision as Elena, we carefully selected genetic lines, tracking bloodlines, monitoring strengths, eliminating weaknesses. You two are the perfect genetic combination. Tactical intelligence from Lyra's line, raw physical power from Kale's. Lyra's mind reeled. Her entire existence, her training, her grief, her carefully cultivated hatred, had been nothing more than a carefully constructed breeding program. Your children, Elena continued, will be powerful enough to conquer every neighboring pack. The mate bond between you was magically amplified to ensure you cannot resist breeding. Your bodies are quite literally engineered to produce the next generation of pack rulers. The surrounding wolves remained silent, watching. Not soldiers, not protectors, but witnesses to a brutal genetic manipulation generations in the making. Marcus pulled out an ancient scroll, its edges yellowed and worn. Genetic mapping from centuries ago. Look, he pointed, each mating carefully planned. Each child selected for specific traits. You are the pinnacle of that selection. Kale's rage radiated through their bond, not just at the revelation, but at the cold, clinical way their parents described their lives as nothing more than a breeding experiment. We will not allow this, Kale growled, his wolf rising close to the surface. Elena's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Allow? You have no choice. The magical bond ensures compliance. Suddenly, pack members moved. Strong hands grabbed Lyra and Kale, separating them with brutal efficiency. Their mate bond screamed in protest, the physical separation causing immediate, intense pain. You will be kept apart, Elena announced, her voice clinical, until you agree to fulfill your purpose. Breed. Produce the next generation of pack rulers. Lyra fought against the hands restraining her, her tactical mind already plotting escape. But the magical bond weakened her, the separation from Kyle causing physical agony. Kale roared, a sound of pure animal fury, as he was dragged in the opposite direction. Their bond pulsed with desperate connection, fighting against their forced separation. The last thing Lyra saw was Cale's eyes, burning with rage, promise, and an unbreakable connection that transcended their parents' manipulation. Then darkness descended, and she was pulled away into pack imprisonment. The silver-lined cell hummed with a low, painful frequency that kept Lyra's wolf suppressed. Cold metal walls reflected her own haunted expression, a constant reminder of her imprisonment. The cell's design was precise, engineered to prevent any possibility of transformation, with intricate magical wards woven into every surface. Elena entered precisely at dawn, her footsteps measured and calculated. She wore the same crisp white uniform she always wore during strategic meetings, treating this interaction like another tactical briefing. "You've been here 3 days," Elena stated, her voice devoid of maternal warmth. "3 days to understand the importance of your role?" Lyra said nothing. Her silence was a weapon, a form of resistance her mother had never been able to break. Elena continued, pulling out a detailed genetic chart. "Your great-grandmother was selected for her exceptional tracking abilities. Your grandfather, for his strategic mind. Each generation carefully chosen, each bloodline meticulously mapped." Through the mate bond, Lyra could feel Cale's own frustration. He was experiencing a similar interrogation, his father Marcus using cold logic to explain their destiny. "The war between Silvermoon and Bloodfang was never real," Elena explained, her fingers tracing the genetic lineage. "It was a carefully constructed narrative. We needed to keep both packs isolated, pure, to prevent outside genetic interference." Lyra's mind flashed to her dead brothers. Their deaths, which she had blamed on Bloodfang for years, were now revealed as another calculated move in this elaborate genetic chess game. "Your bond with Cale was enhanced," Elena continued. "Magical amplifiers introduced generations ago. Every moment of your supposed hatred was actually a carefully designed attraction. The fighting, the tension, all of it was engineered to create the perfect mating tension. Each word was a surgical strike intended to break Lyra's spirit. But something unexpected was happening. Instead of feeling defeated, Lyra felt a growing sense of defiance. Through their mate bond, she could feel Cale's similar emotional landscape. Where Elena and Marcus expected defeat, they were finding strength. "You think you can control us," Lyra finally spoke, her voice low and dangerous. "But what you've done is give us something you never expected." Elena's eyebrow arched. "And what's that?" "A common enemy," Lyra responded. The mate bond between her and Cale pulsed, not with the manufactured attraction her parents had engineered, but with a genuine connection. A connection they were choosing, moment by moment. Her mother's manipulation had backfired spectacularly. By revealing the truth, she had given Lyra and Cale something more powerful than genetic programming, a shared purpose. Across the pack compound, in another silver-lined cell, Cale was experiencing a similar confrontation with his father. Marcus spoke of genetic potential, of destiny, of the grand design that had created them. But Cale was listening with a warrior's ears. Every detail was a potential weakness. Every explanation was another piece of intelligence he could use. Their parents believed they were presenting inevitability. Instead, they were providing a roadmap of resistance. The mate bond between Lyra and Cale had been manufactured. Their initial attraction had been engineered. But their love, their commitment to each other, that was entirely their own. And that made all the difference. The silver-lined cell had become a prison of calculated silence. For 7 days, Lyra and Cale had been separated. Their only connection the mate bond that hummed between them like an underground river of shared consciousness. Each moment of imprisonment had become a tactical planning session. Through stolen sensations and carefully masked emotional signals, they had plotted their escape with surgical precision. Their parents believed they had broken their spirits, but they had instead created the most dangerous weapon imaginable. Two highly trained wolves with a perfectly synchronized bond. Lyra felt the first tremor of movement. Her muscles coiled beneath her skin, wolf senses sharpening despite the silver suppression. The guards outside her cell, two hulking Silver Moon warriors, would never see her coming. Simultaneously, in the Bloodfang compound, Kale's body tensed. Through their bond, they synchronized their breathing, their heartbeats matching in a rhythm of pure predatory intention. The first guard outside Lyra's cell never saw her move. Years of tactical training from her pack had transformed her into a weapon of precise violence. As the cell door opened for her daily inspection, she struck. Her hand caught the first guard's throat, crushing his windpipe before he could even register her movement. The second guard reached for his weapon, but Lyra was already in motion. A blur of calculated strikes that broke bones and silenced potential alarms. In the Bloodfang compound, Kale erupted with similar savage efficiency. His father had trained him to be the perfect warrior, never understanding that the weapon could be turned against its creator. The first two guards fell before they could sound an alarm, their bodies crumpling from precisely targeted strikes that maximized pain and minimized noise. The mate bond between them pulsed with shared excitement, a dangerous synchronization that amplified their individual strengths. Lyra's tactical mind merged with Kale's raw physical power, creating a fighting force more dangerous than either could be alone. Wolves throughout both compounds began to realize something was wrong. Alarms started to sound, but Lyra and Kyle were already moving. They left trails of wounded warriors, not killed, but strategically incapacitated. Each strike was a message. They were not murderers, but survivors. Lyra's path through the Silver Moon compound was a dance of brutal efficiency. The warriors who had trained her now fell before her skills. She used every technique they had taught her, turning their own teachings into weapons of escape. Joints were dislocated, pressure points struck with surgical precision. Wolves dropped without fatal wounds, but unable to pursue. Kale moved similarly through the Bloodfang territories. His father's elite warriors fell before him, each strike a rejection of the genetic programming that had tried to control him. He was the weapon they had created, but he would choose his own target. The mate bond pulled them toward each other with magnetic intensity. With each step, with each wounded warrior left behind, they moved closer. Not just physically, but emotionally. Two souls who had been manipulated their entire lives, now choosing their own path. Lyra could feel Kale's presence growing stronger, not just through their bond, but through the physical world. Her wolf senses tracked him like a beacon, their connection transcending the physical limitations of their separate compounds. Wolves pursued them. Alarm systems blared. But Lyra and Kale moved with a coordinated grace that made them nearly untouchable. They were no longer just individuals. They were a unit, a fighting force more powerful than any single wolf could imagine. Their escape was not just a physical journey, but a declaration of independence. Every wounded warrior they left behind was a statement. They would not be controlled, manipulated, or contained. The bond between them sang with anticipation. They were racing toward each other, toward freedom, toward a future they would define for themselves. The ceremonial grounds stretched. Before them, a massive circular clearing surrounded by ancient trees. Moonlight filtered through dense branches, casting silver shadows across ground that had witnessed generations of wolf pack rituals. Lyra and Kale stood shoulder to shoulder, their bodies radiating a newfound unity that was both terrifying and magnificent. No longer did they look like the reluctant, hate-filled heirs who had been forced into a mating ceremony weeks ago. Now they moved with synchronized precision, their bodies telling a story of survival, of shared struggle. Their clothing was torn and bloodied from their escape, but their postures were unbowed. Years of pack conditioning had fallen away, revealing two warriors who had chosen each other against impossible odds. From the tree line, wolves began to emerge. The Silver Moon pack arrived from the eastern side, led by Lyra's mother, a tall, razor-sharp woman whose eyes burned with cold calculation. From the western edge, Kyle's father approached, his massive frame emblematic of traditional alpha dominance. The parents' faces showed a mixture of fury and something else, a hint of fear that hadn't existed before their children's escape. "You will return." Lyra's mother spoke first, her voice a precise blade of control. "Your roles are predetermined. The pack's future depends on your compliance." Kyle's father stepped forward, his massive frame casting a long shadow. "This ends now. You will submit to our guidance." Instead of cowering, Lyra and Kyle exchanged a look that spoke volumes, of shared pain, of discovered truth, of a bond stronger than blood or pack loyalty. "We challenge," Lyra said, her voice cutting through the night's silence. "We challenge for alpha leadership of both packs." A ripple of shock moved through the assembled wolves. Pack challenges were sacred, ritualistic. But the way Lyra and Kale stood, perfectly aligned, their bodies humming with shared energy, suggested this was no ordinary challenge. The Bao parents laughed, a synchronized, dismissive sound that echoed through the clearing. "You?" Lyra's mother said, her contempt clear. "You who have been manipulated since birth? You think you can challenge generations of leadership?" Kyle's father added, "You are children playing at rebellion. You know nothing of pack leadership." Lyra and Kale remained utterly still. Their silence was more powerful than any words. "We know everything," Kale finally responded. His voice was calm, certain. "We know about the manufactured war. We know about the calculated murders. We know how you've controlled both packs through fear and manufactured conflict." The assembled wolves began to murmur. Information was spreading, whispers of doubt replacing blind obedience. "And we know something else," Lyra continued. She reached out and took Kyle's hand, a gesture that sent another shockwave through the gathering. "We've learned to share power through our bond. We are stronger together than any single alpha could ever be." The implications of her statement hung in the air. Their bond wasn't just emotional, it was tactical, strategic. They could literally see through each other's perspectives, feel each other's intentions, coordinate with superhuman precision. Their parents' laughter died. The fear in their eyes became more pronounced. This was no longer a simple challenge. This was a fundamental threat to everything they had built. The ceremonial grounds held its breath, waiting. The challenge began with a thunderous roar that split the night. Lyra lunged toward her mother, a blur of calculated fury, while Kyle charged his father with raw, powerful determination. Their movements were unlike anything the watching pack had ever seen. Though physically separated, Lyra and Kale moved as a single organism. When Lyra's mother blocked a strike, Kale would instinctively create an opening on his own battlefield. When Kale's father attempted a brutal takedown, Lyra would send a surge of tactical warning through their bond, allowing Kale to dodge with impossible precision. "You killed my brothers!" Lyra screamed, her wolf form flickering between human and canine as she struck her mother. Each blow was punctuated with a revelation. "Not the Bloodfang pack! You murdered them!" Her mother, an experienced fighter, snarled and countered, but Lyra's movements were unpredictable. The mate bond allowed her to anticipate attacks before they happened. transforming her into a weapon more dangerous than any traditional warrior. Across the battlefield, Kale roared his own accusations. "You murdered your own mate. My mother died because she questioned your war." His massive frame slammed into his father, each impact revealing another layer of the decades-long manipulation. Pack members began to whisper. Young wolves who had lost parents, siblings, friends in the manufactured conflict looked on with growing confusion. The choreographed hatred that had defined their entire existence was crumbling before their eyes. A young silver moon wolf, no more than 19, suddenly stepped forward. "Is it true?" he called out. "Did we lose our families to your lies?" More wolves began to murmur. The carefully constructed narrative of hatred was unraveling with each blow Lyra and Kale struck. The bond between the mates was more than physical. When Lyra took a brutal hit, Kale's strength surged through their connection. When Kale's father landed a punishing strike, Lyra's tactical mind provided an instant counter-strategy. "We were breeding weapons!" Lyra shouted, dodging her mother's attack. "Not protecting our people, controlling them!" Her mother's attacks became more desperate. The perfectly composed alpha female was losing control, her movements revealing the fear underneath years of calculated manipulation. Kyle, sensing the shift in momentum, roared a challenge that seemed to vibrate through every wolf present. "No more lies," he thundered. "No more manufactured hatred!" Some younger pack members began to move. A few blood-fang wolves shifted allegiance, standing closer to Lyra. A cluster of Silver Moon warriors took hesitant steps away from their traditional leadership. The battle was no longer just a challenge. It was a public unmasking of generations of calculated deception. "We were never enemies," Lyra declared, her voice carrying across the ceremonial grounds. "We were tools, weapons created to maintain power for those who would sacrifice everything, including their own children, to maintain control." The moment stretched taut as tension, like a bowstring ready to snap. Lyra's mother lay pinned beneath her, teeth bared and breath ragged. Kyle stood over his defeated father, muscles coiled and ready to deliver a killing blow. Years of training, of hatred, of manufactured conflict had led to this precise moment. Every wolf present held their collective breath, expecting blood, expecting vengeance. But Lyra did not strike. Her grip remained firm, but her eyes shifted, no longer burning with rage, but with something more powerful: understanding. "You don't deserve death," she said quietly to her mother. "You deserve to watch everything you built crumble." Kyle echoed her sentiment, pulling his father up by the scruff instead of delivering a fatal blow. "Exile," he declared. "You'll live to see your lies exposed." The watching pack murmured in shocked confusion. Execution was the traditional punishment for betrayal. Mercy was not a language they understood. Lyra stepped forward, her movements deliberate. She and Kyle had discussed this moment through their bond. Every revelation would be strategic, calculated to minimize further conflict while exposing the complete truth. "We have evidence," she announced, her voice carrying across the ceremonial grounds. "Documents that prove our parents manufactured this war. Correspondence, battle plans, proof of assassinations disguised as pack attacks." From a leather satchel hidden during their escape, she began spreading documents. Detailed maps showing fabricated raid routes. Letters between alpha leaders discussing how to manipulate young wolves into continued hatred. Surgical strike plans that revealed decades of calculated violence. "These are not allegations," Kale added, his deep voice resonant with authority. "These are facts." Wolves from both packs began to approach, some hesitant, some angry, some weeping. An older Silver Moon warrior, his face scarred from years of conflict, picked up a document showing his own brother's murder was staged. "This can't be true," he whispered. But his hands shook as he read. A Bloodfang elder dropped to her knees, decades of grief transforming into a keening wail. "My entire family," she murmured. "Killed for nothing." The revelations crashed through the gathering like a tsunami. Some wolves refused to believe, clinging to their generational hatred. Others wept openly, the weight of unnecessary loss crushing their spirits. Lyra and Kale stood together, their bond visible in how they moved. Synchronized, connected, powerful. They were no longer just heirs or mates. They were becoming something entirely new. Leaders who understood that true strength meant breaking cycles of violence. "We invite questions," Lyra said. "We invite scrutiny. Every document, every piece of evidence is open for examination." The ceremonial grounds became a place of raw, painful truth-telling. Wolves who had lost parents, siblings, lovers during the manufactured conflict began sharing stories, comparing experiences, realizing they had more in common than they'd ever been allowed to understand. Kale's hand found Lyra's, their fingers intertwining, a physical representation of the bond that had revealed this conspiracy. They would rebuild. They would heal. They would be different. The weeks following their revelation moved like a slow, healing tide across both packs. Lyra and Kale understood that dismantling generations of hatred would require more than speeches and documents. They would need to rebuild trust through consistent, deliberate action. Their first challenge came during the initial pack meetings. Older wolves, scarred from years of conflict, sat on opposite sides of the gathering ground, their bodies tense and watchful. Younger wolves looked confused, uncertain how to interact with former enemies. Kyle spoke first, his voice calm but commanding. "We are not asking you to forget your history," he explained. "We are asking you to see beyond the lies that created that history." Lyra stood beside him, her tactical mind evident in how she structured their approach. They began with practical integrations, mixed hunting parties, shared patrol routes, communal training sessions. Each small interaction chipped away at the walls of mistrust. The first mixed hunting party was tense. Wolves from Silver Moon and Bloodfang packs moved stiffly, watching each other with centuries of ingrained suspicion. But as they tracked deer through the misty forest, something unexpected happened. A younger Bloodfang wolf stumbled in a rocky section, and a Silver Moon hunter reflexively steadied him. The moment was small, barely noticeable, but it was a crack in the armor of hatred. Lyra watched these interactions carefully, her wolf senses attuned to the pack's emotional landscape. She and Kale discussed every nuance through their mate bond, strategizing how to continue breaking down barriers. Training sessions became a critical tool. By mixing combat techniques and requiring wolves to partner across pack lines, they forced direct interaction. Young wolves who had grown up hearing terrible stories about the enemy now found themselves learning from those same supposed enemies. Not everything was smooth. Some older wolves refused to participate, muttering about betrayal. A few violent incidents erupted, old grudges dying hard. But Lyra and Kale handled each conflict with a blend of firm discipline and compassionate understanding. "We will not tolerate violence," Kale would say during disciplinary meetings. "But we also understand the pain that drives that violence." Lyra would add, her voice precise and controlled, "Healing takes time. We are committed to that process." Their own relationship became a powerful symbol. Wolves who had once seen them as enemies now watched them work together, lead together, love together. Their bond was visible in every shared glance, every synchronized movement. Mixed pack events became more frequent. Communal meals where Silver Moon and Bloodfang wolves sat together. Shared celebrations of hunts and seasonal changes. Slowly, Almost imperceptibly, a new identity began to form. Not Silvermoon, not Bloodfang, but something entirely new. It was during one such gathering that Lyra first noticed the changes in her body. Her wolf senses had always been sharp, but now they felt different, more intense. The scents around her seemed richer, her connection to the pack's energy more profound. When she and Kale were alone that evening, she shared her suspicions. His response was immediate, a surge of protective energy through their bond, a deep, primal joy that was both his and hers. "We're pregnant," he whispered, pressing a hand to her still flat stomach. The child would be conceived in love, not manipulation, not strategic breeding, but a genuine connection between two individuals who had chosen each other, who had fought through generations of manufactured hatred to find their truth. Their pack, their new merged pack, was watching a future being born. Not just in Lyra's womb, but in the way young wolves were learning to see each other as potential friends rather than automatic enemies. Small victories accumulated, a Bloodfang pup and a Silvermoon pup sharing a toy. Hunters from different former packs laughing together after a successful hunt. Elders beginning to share stories not of conflict, but of survival. Lyra and Kyle knew the road ahead was long. Healing generational trauma wasn't a quick process, but they were committed. To each other, to their pack, to a future built on understanding rather than fear. The full moon hung low and heavy over the ceremonial grounds, casting a silvery glow across the merged pack. Where once these grounds had been a site of forced separation and manufactured conflict, now they represented unity and hope. Lyra's labor had begun at sunset, her wolf senses heightened by the lunar energy. Kyle remained beside her, their bond thrumming with anticipation and shared strength. Surrounding them, wolves from both former packs, Silvermoon and Bloodfang, watched in silent solidarity. The pack's healer, an older woman who had seen the transformation from bitter enemies to united family, moved with practiced calm. She recognized this birth as more than just the arrival of two pups. It was symbolic of everything Lyra and Kale had fought to create. Lyra's labor was intense but controlled. Years of warrior training had prepared her body for physical challenge, and Kale's unwavering support flowed through their mate bond. When the first pup emerged, a silver-marked female with her mother's fierce eyes, the pack let out a collective breath of wonder. Minutes later, a male pup followed, his eyes a deep crimson that marked him distinctly Bloodfang. The physical embodiment of their united bloodlines brought tears to many eyes. Wolves who had once considered each other mortal enemies now stood shoulder to shoulder, celebrating new life. As the pups were cleaned and nestled against Lyra, Kale's hand intertwined with hers. Their bond pulsed with a love that had been hard-won, not granted by magical manipulation, but chosen through struggle, understanding, and mutual respect. The ceremonial grounds where they had been forcibly mated now became the site of a voluntary renewal. With their newborn twins watching, Lyra and Kyle stood together, facing their pack. This was no longer about two separate bloodlines, but a single unified future. "We choose each other," Lyra declared, her voice strong and clear. "Not because of magic, not because of our parents' schemes, but because we see each other, truly see each other." Kale nodded, his hand still holding hers. "Our love is our own. Our pack is our own." The wolves around them, young and old, from both original packs, watched in reverent silence. They understood this moment represented more than a personal commitment. It was a collective healing. As the full moon reached its zenith, Lyra and Kyle renewed their bond. This time, no external magic controlled them. Their connection was pure, chosen, real. Their twins lay nearby, a living testament to the possibility of unity. The silver mark and crimson eyes intertwined, just as their parents had intertwined two seemingly impossible worlds. In that moment, surrounded by their transformed pack, Lyra and Kale knew their journey had been worth every struggle. Hatred could indeed become love. Division could become connection. And the future was theirs to create